Hello, my name is Robert Martinez, and I am a student at Fullerton College. Me and my associates are studying to see if AI involvement and perceived trustworthiness is linked together. Introduction. Our hypothesis of this study is that as perceived AI involvement increases, perceived trustworthiness of information decreases. The purpose of the study is to examine the relationship between perceived AI involvement and perceived trustworthiness. This hypothesis came about was from previous research cited as from Alte and Gherardi. Quote, AI generated content can influence audience perceptions in different ways. Labeling content as AI generated has been shown to reduce trust. Another citation I would like to add would be from Vienczewski and Kramer. Quote, individuals evaluate content differently depending on whether they believe it was produced by a human or an algorithm.
Hi, my name is Rosina Alfieri, and I will be presenting the methods section. For this study, the final sample included 72 participants. The population we focused on was Fullerton College students, and the sampling method was convenient sampling. Participants were recruited through available course networks, so the sample was based on students who had access to the survey and chose to participate. Participants completed an online Google Forms survey titled AI Involvement and Trustworthiness. The survey measured two main things: how much participants perceived AI involvement in online informational content, and how trustworthy they perceived online information to be. Participation was anonymous, voluntary, and confidential. No names, ID numbers, or email addresses were collected. Participants could exit the survey at any time, and the survey took about 15 minutes to complete. Some participants may have received extra credit at their professor's discretion. This slide shows the main demographic breakdown of the participants. For gender, most participants identified as female, with 50 female participants. There were also 18 male participants, 1 non-binary participant, and 3 participants who declined to state their gender. For age, most participants were between 18 and 25 years old, with 48 participants in that range. There were 20 participants between 25 and 35, 2 participants between 35 and 45, and 2 participants who were 45 or older. Overall, the sample was mostly female and mostly made up of younger college students between 18 and 25 years old. This slide shows how participants estimated the percentage of online information content they saw in the past 7 days that they believed was created or influenced by artificial intelligence. Participants answered this as a percentage from 0 to 100. The responses were then grouped into ranges. Most participants estimated that AI involvement was somewhere between 30 and 89%. Specifically, 19 participants chose the 30 to 49% range, 14 chose the 50 to 69% range, and 18 chose the 70 to 89% range. This shows that many participants believed AI was involved in a noticeable amount of the online informational content they viewed, although almost no one estimated extremely low or extremely high levels. This slide explains the structure of the survey and the main variables. The survey began with informed consent, followed by demographics, instructions, the questionnaire, a debriefing statement, and participant verification. The study used a correlational survey design, meaning we were looking for a relationship between two variables, not trying to prove cause and effect. The survey was completed through Google Forms. The first variable was perceived AI involvement, which measured how much participants believed online information was created or influenced by AI. The second variable was perceived online information trustworthiness, which measured how trustworthy participants generally viewed online information. The trustworthiness questions used a 1 through 5 response scale, where 1 meant strongly disagree and 5 meant strongly agree. The procedure began with recruitment. The survey link was emailed to the psychology department and distributed through course professors. Before participating, students completed the consent portion of the survey. They checked a box confirming that they were at least 18 years old and voluntarily agreed to participate. The survey order was title page, informed consent, demographics, instructions, questionnaire, debriefing, and participant verification. After data collection, the responses were prepared for analysis. Unusable responses were removed, and reverse-coded items were inverted before creating the final trustworthiness score. Finally, a Pearson correlation was used to test the relationship between perceived AI involvement and perceived trustworthiness of online information.
Hello, my name is Cruz. On this slide, we examine the relationship between perceived AI involvement and perceived trustworthiness using a Pearson correlation analysis. The results show a very weak negative relationship between the two variables, meaning that as perceived AI involvement increased, trustworthiness ratings slightly decreased. However, the relationship was not statistically significant, with a correlation coefficient of R equals negative 0.049 and a p-value of 0.340. This suggests that perceived AI involvement was not so strongly associated with trustworthiness within our sample. The scatter plot also demonstrates very little overall correlation between the variables. Our final sample size included 72 participants. Results in histograms. The slide presents the descriptive statistics and histograms for both variables. Perceived AI involvement had a mean score of 43.96 with a standard deviation of 22.88. Perceived trustworthiness had a mean score of 3.01 with a standard deviation of 0.42. The histograms were used to evaluate the distributions of the variables and determine whether the data were appropriate for analysis. Overall, both variables appeared reasonably normal with no major distributional problems observed. This indicated that the data were acceptable for conducting the Pearson correlation analysis. This slide focuses on reliability testing and data screening procedures. The trustworthiness questionnaire demonstrated strong internal reliability with a Cronbach alpha of 0.80, indicating that the survey items consistently measured perceived trustworthiness. During data screening, 2 participants' responses were removed because they contained invalid range-based answers. After screening, the final sample consisted of 72 participants. Additionally, no significant outliers were identified during the analysis, suggesting that the dataset was appropriate for further statistical testing.
Hello, this is Rosina Alfieri again, and I will be presenting the discussion section. For this study, the hypothesis was not supported. Perceived AI involvement was not significantly related to perceived trustworthiness of online information. One possible explanation is that the study asked participants about their general perception of AI involvement in everyday online information, rather than asking them to judge one specific AI-labeled post, article, or video. Because of that, participants may have been thinking about many different kinds of content at once. Trustworthiness may also depend on more than AI involvement alone. For example, people may judge information based on the source, the topic, how it is presented, whether other people support it, or what they already expect from that type of content. The main interpretation is that students may not automatically distrust information simply because they believe AI was involved. There were a few limitations that may have affected the results. First, perceived AI involvement was measured with only 1% estimate. This may not fully capture the difference between minor AI editing, AI assistance, and content that was completely AI generated. Second, the sample may not fully represent all Fullerton College students. Most participants were female, so the results may be less generalizable if the gender is related to trust or attitudes toward AI. Third, participants had to estimate AI involvement in content they had seen over the past 7 days. This could create recall issues or detection bias because participants may not actually know whether content was written by a human, assisted by AI, or fully AI generated. Overall, these limitations may have made it harder to detect a clear relationship between AI involvement and trustworthiness. These findings suggest that the relationship between AI involvement and trustworthiness may be more complex than a simple positive or negative relationship. Theoretically, this means researchers may need to look beyond whether AI is involved and consider other credibility cues such as source, topic, labeling, and presentation of the information. In an applied sense, educators, students, and media platforms should not assume that AI involvement alone determines whether people trust or distrust information. Practically, this suggests that credibility may depend on transparency, source, information, labeling, topic, and other details that help people evaluate whether information seems reliable. Future research could explore this topic in more specific ways. One direction would be to study AI-generated news and whether students trust AI-generated news differently than other types of online information. Another direction would be to examine AI labels across different topics. For example, researchers could compare whether labeling content as AI-generated affects trust differently for academic, health, political, or entertainment content. Future studies could also look at familiarity with AI. Students who have more experience using AI tools may evaluate content differently than students who have less experience with AI. Overall, future research should look more closely at the type of content, the presence of AI labels, and participants' personal experience with AI tools.
Hello again, and now on to our references. These are the academic sources used throughout our study and literature review. The references include peer review, research on artificial intelligence, credibility, trustworthiness, and audience perceptions of AI-generated content. All references were formatted accordingly.